Women's Soccer Review Podcast with Duane Rollins and Jonathan Tannenwald on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network. This is Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and you notice in the intro of the show how it says Duane Rollins and Jonathan Tannenwald. Well, it's been a little while since Duane's been on, so it's time to do something about that, and welcome Duane back.
Duane, how are you? John? I'm well,
good.
Jonathan. Yeah, lots going on in the life, but I'm happy to be back here today and to talk a little bit about some exciting developments. At least I hope so up here.
Yeah, the subject of this show is going to be an announcement by the Canadian Soccer Association earlier this month in May. Yes, it's May. I know it's been a long time again since we did our last show, but here we are on May 9th recording this show, and on May 7th, the Canadian Soccer Association announced that it has hired Breagha Carr-Harris, and if I pronounce that name incorrectly, I'm very sorry, as its head of women's professional soccer. Now, realize there was a league called Women's Professional Soccer back in the day that is defunct. So they're not hiring somebody for something defunct. They're hiring somebody for something in the future. And here we have a quote from Dr. Nick Bondis, the president of the Canadian Soccer Association. Now more than ever, the women's professional game deserves to have its rightful place in this country. We are very excited to welcome Breagha Carr-Harris to this newly created role, which is critical to the advancement of the women's professional game in this country. Duane, there is no women's professional game in your country. So what do we make of this?
Well, Nick Bondis, the president of the CSA, I've talked to him quite a bit over the years on this subject, and he's always came off as very sincere to me in his desire to find a pathway to really drill down and focus on that side of the game. It's kind of shameful, not kind of shameful. It's a lot of shameful that there is no professional teams in this country, with all due respect to the sort of semi-pro teams that are not one league below the U.S. League out west. There's a couple of teams. So with all due respect to them, that said, the proof's in the pudding, right? Like we're going to need to see this thing play out before I'm willing to give them full credit here. But it's nice to see them taking concrete steps that may eventually lead us to what's long overdue.
And, how do you expect that to play out? It's not a fair question. I realize. How do you expect it to play out? Because there are a lot of different ways that it could play out, how it starts, where it ends up. Obviously, there are a lot of calls to have an NWSL team in Canada, whether it's in Toronto or Vancouver. And why don't we start there, Duane, which, is that, do you think, from what you understand, is that going to be the first target?
I know, again, having talked to people at the CSA, they're open to both models, the two models being the sort of the existing model on the men's side, where you have a Canadian league that's developed eventually, but you start with the NWSL teams in this case, the MLS teams on the men's side, of course. And I tend to lean that way. I think that that's the best pathway to success, and I know that's going to be something that a lot of Canadian listeners don't like to hear, but I'm just realistic about the concerns and the problems that would come to starting a league off the scratch. I mean, the CNPL, the men's league, is not exactly tearing it up attendance wise, and it's well backed, so it's fine, and they have the 2026 World Cup to sort of point to and motivate them. But that said, you're still operating a league there where one man owns three teams. That would be Bob Young, who owns Forge, Halifax, and part of Pacific. I believe Pacific anyway. There's a third team involved. That's a problem. And if you can't get the investors on that side, which unfortunately is more commercially viable in people's minds, I stress, but nonetheless, that perception is out there, then it's difficult for me to see how you'd find enough investment to start a Canadian Premier League off the start. But what I do think is possible, and what I think is kind of shameful, again, that doesn't exist already, is to put a team in one of those markets that has the MLS teams that can sort of lean on that for their ticketing. I think you could probably get to an easy 10,000 pretty quickly in a city like the size I'm in. There's at least 10,000 people that are going to go week in, week out to an NWSL game. I'm pretty convinced of that. You just need to build it and they'll come, right? Just steal a famous movie quote there. So what's the right answer? I don't know necessarily. I would ideally love to see a Canadian Women's Premier League, or whatever they call it. I hope we can get there, but I think we have to take the right steps to start to grow that market. And it starts really with, there's an existing structure out there that speaks to the North American mindset in terms of what a pro league looks like. Canadians, struggled with all Canadian leagues because we're used to a north-south orientation in terms of how our teams play. I mean, every sport we play in is north-south, with the exception of the Canadian Football League and the Canadian Premier League of late, right? There's also a basketball league that's all Canadian too, and it's doing the same sort of stuff that the CanPL is. So it's not something that we're used to seeing. It's something we're starting to see do a bit more now, but really we just, that investment, if you can find it there. And look, last thought on this, Jonathan, before I let you jump back in. I find it particularly egregious that MLSE and its wealth and its insane popularity cannot serve its female fans by having a professional women's sports team either at the WNBA level or the NWSL level. I've never come to grips with that. This is one of the richest sports organizations in the world. So the fact they can't pony up a little bit to get in the NWSL, they can't have enough insight to do that, to me, it strikes me as shameful, is what it does.
Well, that tees up the next point, which says right here, Carr-Harris joins Canada Soccer with 15 years of broad-based experience as a sports professional, having worked with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment across all 6 brands.
Yeah, and hopefully that's a sign of something. Look, there seems to be, in the last year or so, just as an observation here, there seems to be something has turned. The screw has turned on women's pro sports in terms of their visibility and their success. And the numbers on TV and in stadiums are proving that there's a market there for them. And MLSE, for all of its faults, is not a dumb company. It's a successful company. There's got to be some bells going off somewhere to tell them that perhaps this is a viable opportunity for them. Like, forget the should stuff, like should do. Just think about purely from a financial level. To me, it seems like a no-brainer that you want to get in on both sides. Like, this isn't a basketball show, so we won't dwell on that. But I think that the WNBA makes a lot of sense too. The popularity of the Toronto Raptors here is pretty strong. So, yeah, the women's side there, and I think again you do quite well. And I just don't understand why they don't have the strength of fortitude, the insight to do that. So hopefully it's a sign. Maybe with that connection, something can happen there.
So I want to go back to the, we've spoken about the NWSL as a first step. It does say in this release, and let's give some credit here to the again, in terms of viability, the CSA said it received over 70 applicants for the job. And it says here, the newly created high-profile role will be dedicated to launching women's professional soccer in Canada, a league that will promote equality, diversion, inclusion, and reconciliation, and that can be a platform for breaking barriers and developing women leaders. Now, okay, that's a lot of corporate speak. That's a lot of high-level corporate speak. But I'm going to zero in on 2 words, and they are A and league. Mm-hmm. That's the end point. And I think about, some things you mentioned a few minutes ago about what it's going to take to get there, because we all know what it's going to take to get there. It's going to take a lot of money, first of all, a very, 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 very large amount of money that is going to be lost and not made back for quite a while, because that's how professional sports work generally. Mm-hmm. Where is Media Pro, which is known in Canada as One Soccer? Where are they in this?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I do know that they have always spoke openly at the CanPL level, the men's league, too, about having a women's side eventually. And that predates the league. I was having conversations with people involved with that build, Paul Byrne, among to name drop another former MLSE employee who was involved in the launch of the CanPL. He always spoke openly about that, as did the former commissioner. Look, I think that there is an advantage to having followed the men's launch, in the sense that you can sort of look at what worked and what didn't. Now, of course, they had a global pandemic to deal with off their launch, which is not ideal in any situation, let alone when you're trying to get a professional league going. So it's not a perfect comparison, but I do think that there's probably some lessons to be learned in terms of the business models. I stress, and I think that you need to regionalize it. Like, I really do. In terms of the travel, that is the most killer thing you can do in this country. If you're only going to draw 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 fans a game and you're not getting much TV money at all, I mean, that's the one thing with One Soccer is it's not like they're paying big money for the rights. It's kind of a loss leader for them. They need to figure out ways to save some money. And where does One Soccer fit in? I think they have to have a TV partner. You have to have cooperation with the CanPL. You don't necessarily have to be directly connected. I don't think you necessarily need, like Pacific Women, Cavalry Women. Those are teams in the CanPL, if you don't know. But you have to, I think, work together. It just makes so much sense in terms of, putting the tickets together. Maybe even, if you could perhaps even play double headers or something like that. Like there's stuff to do. And I think the One Soccer is absolutely a big part of that for sure.
It makes me wonder about this too. And this is a subject that you and I and Kevin Laramie, our producer, have battered around for probably as long as I've known you guys. Because some people are going to say, well, where are TSN and Rogers Sportsnet in this? And we know for all those years, this is something that comes up on Twitter often these days in particular. If Rogers and Bell for a long time did not want the Canadian national team rights, or at least they did not want to pay the amounts of money that the CSA or somebody, I don't know who, Duane, you would know who, was putting on there as the price tag. Well, now they're very popular and it's different calculus. But One Soccer is out there, and I'm going to accuse them of hoarding the rights for themselves, which they're entitled to do to a way because that's how it's set up. But there was, for an example, on the men's side during the Men's World Cup qualifiers, a lot of people had to put some people in a room and lock the door and said, don't come out of here until the games are on a broader TV channel.
Yeah.
So how does that, interplay with the potential, for more than one entity to be interested in some of these games?
Yeah. I look back to the early days of, first off, just to underline what you're saying, I look back to the early days of TFC, which I was deeply involved with, Toronto FC. And one of the greatest things I think that drove their early success is that it was on the CBC here, and you could watch it for free on over the air, right? And that was a big issue. Like, you didn't even have to have cable; you could get antennas and watch the games. I can't help but think that helped drive that success. People saw the party that was going on down there, and they wanted to get part of it. So you absolutely need a TV partner, and you absolutely need to be somewhere that people can find. One Soccer is great for the hardcore. I will love the fact that you can watch the games on demand at any time. That's typically how I watch the CanPL. I don't watch it live because I've got too much MLS on my plate in the weekend, so I'll just rewatch. There's only 4 games a week, so it's not that hard. But I'll throw them on during the day. It's a great platform, and the app runs great on my TV, so it's works all around. But I mean, if there's 10,000 subscribers to that thing, I'd be surprised. I know from having talked to people about background that some of the games have like numbers, below this podcast in terms of the people watching. And I don't say that to be dismissive or to make fun, but it's just the reality of it. You're not getting enough exposure, and there's a lot of talk about how to fix that and whether or not One Soccer needs to be doing more. I mean, they've talked a lot about getting on over-the-air TVs or getting on cable packages, but there's only a couple channels. There's only a couple places where that exists, and there's probably less than maybe 100,000 TVs out there where you can watch the thing on your cable package. So it's really an issue. You mentioned the Canadian national team. If they did not get good, basically, I'm not sure that they would have found those games on TSN, and it was only because basically that Panama goal. They had twisted their arm and got that Panama game on, and Alphonso Davies put that for that run down the sideline and scored what I think was the goal of qualifying for Canada anyway. And that suddenly burst this team into the forefront, and they didn't have to worry about rights anymore. And it was pretty clear that it would have been a mess if it would just been on One Soccer. So they worked that out. When it comes to a potential women's league, again, I would hope that the TV partners might be willing to let some of those games, at least locally, go out on regular TV, on over-the-air TV. I think that's an important factor because for any of these leagues, look, again, I don't hate using men's sport as an example when we're talking about women's sport, but in this particular case, I think it is of note that the CanPL started so recently, and you can look at that as a comparison of what it would be. You look at the markets that are most successful in that league, Victoria and Halifax, basically the two smaller cities involved in the league, and both of them have great local reach. They're big in their local community, and you have to really do that. And I think that's the key to success, is to really become a fixture in the local market and not worry so much about eyeballs outside of that, because you really only need your hardcore, and you get that through exposure. And even if you put the games on YouTube or something, like, there's got to be a way that you can get them out there so people can find them, and that's an important thing.
Longtime listeners of this show, followers of my work and Duane's work, will know that I'm not the world's biggest fan of Media Pro for a lot of reasons. Not that there are league. Well, not that there are their global conglomerate has been accused of many financial misdeeds. How's that for a statement?
Yeah, I think that's a safe one.
I think about the league question, and it leads me to ponder. I know, because I've studied the game in Canada enough, for long enough to understand that there are three big, well-established. We'd probably put them at around Division 3 or 3.5 or so in the United States for listeners listening here. Semi-professional provincial leagues in Canada, one in British Columbia, one in Ontario, and one in Quebec. Mm-hmm. What roles are those leagues going to have to play in building up the structure where eventually, I know there are some relations between, isn't Sigma in some way involved in League One Ontario, for example, right?
Yeah, Sigma and for sure. Sigma FC is the club that Carr-Harr came out of, to give you a comparison there. They are informally the feeder team to Forge FC in CanPL. I mean, the Simeonis brothers run Sigma, right, and Bobby Simeonis is the coach for it. Yeah.
So, but those three leagues are very well established. They put teams in what Duane and I call the Voyageurs Cup. It's got an official name of some kind. I forget what it is, but it's Canada's equivalent of the U.S. Open Cup. Those teams enter into that, and often have, in the past, they've played, I believe, some home games against each other. Then they go and play against the MLS teams and whatnot. But I think about how the entity, the people behind some of those entities are going to have to be involved in whatever comes along, whether it's simple as good politics and good relations, Yet there is an infrastructure there to start building from, to getting toward, even if it is and you would know this, Duane, what those provincial leagues are on the women's side. But there's some infrastructure there, is my point, that can be built upon to help get this further going, right?
Yeah, it's interesting too, because what you're seeing with the advent of the CanPL, people were hopeful that it would drive investment at the highest level of the game. What it's done is it's driven investment at this level that you're speaking of. There's been a lot of new teams that have popped up both on the men's and women's side that are really heavily backed. And what the thinking is, and what people are sort of saying, is that what's going on here is it's a proof of concept. People are investing at this level to see whether they might then want to take that step up. And I think that's really the role that level can play. There's a team called Simcoe County Rovers, Simcoe County is just north of Toronto. So it's a GTA kind of team. Barrie, if you want to know specific, if you know your Canadian geography. What's interesting with that group is who owns it. You've Carr-Harr, and I mentioned him the second time on the show. I'll mention him again. He's one of the co-owners of it, as is Becky Scott. More to the point, this is an interesting development in terms of the money and the investment that's going in at that level. And I think that those teams might directly play a role. Like, they might not, with that Barrie team, for instance, if it's successful, yeah, I could see them being the backers or the technical side of a GTA team in whatever league that exists comes out of this. We're perhaps getting involved in an NWSL bid if we go back to that. Janine Becky, by the way, Becky Scott's a skier. Anyway, but anyhow, that's something that's interesting for sure. But look, that level's decent. I worked in League One Ontario for 3 years as worked in the match day coordinator stuff for them, and the level's pretty good. I would say it's younger. It's a league that, it has a lot of NWSL players or NCAA players. I'm getting too many acronyms today. It has a lot of players on the summer break kind of thing, right? Like it's that kind of league right now.
Yeah, right. There's some of that in the U.S. now too.
Yeah, in terms of like there's a couple women that are late 20s that are still playing. Her name is escaping me right now, so I apologize for it. But their all-time leading scorer in that league is older. I hesitate to say older when I'm talking about someone in their late 20s, but they're much older than most of the players in the league at any rate. But it's rare because they can't pay much money. They're allowed to pay per diems, but it's $50 here and there. If they're playing anything, they might cover their gas, right? That's maybe changing with some of these new teams coming in. The money behind it, you can't help but think that's what their goal is to see what kind of operation that they can develop there and perhaps move up to a higher level at some point. So yeah, it has to be part of it. And you look at the CanPL, the players that are coming in, that it very much serves as a feeder league to that. I mean, they have a draft in the CanPL for the college system up here, but a lot of their players are coming directly from these leagues, and that's where they're developing them from. And that's, we've seen players come in and they go back down sometimes because the CanPL money's not good enough and they like to play at a high level still, like that. You mentioned the Voyageurs Cup. That one team involved in that has several former Canadian Premier League players that are on this team, the Mount Royal team that's playing actually this Wednesday against Forge. So there you go. Just a little bit of a publicity for them, I guess. But it has to be like that. It's a decent level, and it's a level that is needed. And I think that to me, the most exciting thing that's come from the CanPL is that has gotten stronger. The BC League is launched. Ontario League One has got all kinds of expansion finally outside the GTA. All of this is great, and right from the get-go, I've got to give Dino Rossi, the man behind League One Ontario, who sort of started this and he's an underappreciated name in Canadian soccer. People don't know him necessarily, but he's a big part of the drive, and he has a lot of influence in terms of what he's done. From the get-go, there's always been a women's side in League One, and it's always been as it's 1A, 1B, right? Like it's never been seen as anything less than what it is. Or less than the men's side. It's always been given equal treatment. So you've got to give them a lot of credit for that. And it really does, provide an opportunity and fill that niche. So that niche will still be needed forever. You're going to need a league where people can develop at, where, college players can play in the summer to stay fit and all that. So it will continue to do that. And, hopefully if you get some more backing, you can sort of keep some of those, what I call lifer players, which is sorely lacking within the Canadian system. And I think that those type of players can really drive success of the younger players. Because if you're only playing against people your own age and you're always the top fish, this has always been a problem within Canadian soccer at all levels, is that once they get punched in the mouth, when they leave the confines of their comfortable place where they've always been the best player, they sometimes have struggled in the past to step back up on both the men's and women's side of the game. And I think that's a big part of it. So you need kind of get punched in the mouth a little bit when you're younger, right? You need to be pushed, and you need that veteran class, and hopefully they can continue to do that. And if there's a professional, if there's care to the end of it, then people are going to want to play longer. I had one woman that played at a very high level. She was a scholarship player from down south. Tell me that she joked about League One Ontario when it was launching, because she was in that age where she might have played still, and she said, "Well, it's for the league for the unemployed and the college students. Basically, it's the unemployed league, because you have to be unemployed to meet what they wanted in terms of training, but there's no money involved, so you can't you'd have to give your job up basically to work in." Is what she was saying, and that's why she decided she'd go back to school and not play anymore, and that's a loss. This was a player that could have probably pushed and helped grow the sport. But alas, right? If there's no opportunity and you can't pay your bills, I mean, soccer's fun and all. You can just go down and play play in a men's league or something to keep yourself active. But the game's worse off for that. And hopefully these leagues and these teams can continue to develop so we don't lose players like that anymore.
So Kevin, our producer, who will be producing and posting this show after we record it, unfortunately is not on the show with us at the moment. And I would like to ask him this question, but he's not here, so I'm not going to be able to. Where does Quebec land in all of this at a time when there are some pretty good players, from Quebec coming truly through the Canadian women's national team pipeline, which was not always the case? And where is it going to be cultural marketing, media rights, and such wise, which is a hole in One Soccer's resume? I think we can agree on that. And you can explain a little of that too. But where are they going to land in all this? Yeah,
that's the big question, across the board, because they claim that it's been their priority to get into that market from the get-go on the men's side, and they haven't yet. Now, again, you got to give them a little bit of a break because of the situation that was outside their control. So the entire world's control that has sort of messed everything up. But yeah, look, Quebec, as you say, is vital. There has been so much lost from that province, both on all sides of the game, because of the very reason you spoke of. Nepotism has run wild in Canadian soccer over the years. I don't think that's necessarily unique to this country, but it's certainly been a problem here. And a big part of that is that since there hasn't been much hasn't been much involvement from Quebec. They get left out. They get lost, and you can't lose those players. You can't lose those players if you expect to maintain your position as CONCACAF too. Basically, I've been saying this for years that yes, we're the Olympic gold medalists, and that was wonderful. But where's the next generation coming from? If you watch Canada at the youth levels, you'd be terrified, as I have been doing. With all due respect to the young women that are competing, that's not a knock on them. It's a knock on the system. And yeah, you need Quebec involved, and they've done a better job at it. And look, I don't want to sound like an apologist for Nick Bontis. I'm going to cover him like I cover any president, but I've known him for years. As I said at the top of the show, I think he is very sincere about growing the women's game and very committed to that. He has daughters involved in it, among other things. So that's probably part of that, I would think. But nonetheless, he does do good work on this, and he has committed to trying to build this and to fix the problems that have existed for years. And I think one of that was talent identification in the province of Quebec, which has certainly been much better as of late. And I wonder about, I mentioned the cultural and marketing and media rights thing. And I hope you'll just, explain the lack of presence in One Soccer in French and the impact that has had. Yeah, basically, undecided in mind. Like there's, Quebec is primarily a French-speaking province, as most people would know. But if you go outside of Montreal and you don't speak English or you don't speak French, you can struggle in that province. So obviously, if you're not speaking in the language that the people are using, they're not going to listen to you. They're not hearing you. They don't even know you exist in some cases. Ottawa is a market that is significantly bilingual as well. So the fact that they don't have regular French service for Ottawa is ridiculous, frankly. There has been some recent changes at the communications level at the league. Laura Armstrong, formerly of the Toronto Star, just accepted the head of communications, and she's involved with both One Soccer and the KPL now. So the hope is that maybe a bit of a younger, more progressive voice in there might. Laura, she is just that, will help maybe address that. But she's also an Anglophone, so and she's from Ottawa, so she should know that market and that the need, right? So hopefully this gets fixed. But right now, yeah, it's if you don't speak French to Quebecers, if you don't even try, they're not going to respect you or look to you very much. I'll tell you what, though, you do any level of effort, they're very thankful for that. So I just have never understood why they've ignored this. I have many concerns about the leadership of the KPL in terms of their decisions in the first 3 years, and they have not really lived up to what they said they were going to be. But it's hard for people to hear that sometimes because we all want the league to succeed so much. The lack of French is a big part of that. The lack of the female presence is a bigger part of it. So, we're hitting them both right here. Well, and I'll be the stereotypical blunt American for a second. You want the most people possible to watch your league and your broadcasts. You ought to make yourself available to everybody in the country like all the other sports do. Yeah. They do have, in their fact, they do sometimes put some French broadcast up there. They've hired one French broadcaster that they do simulcast on One Soccer. So I should say that, but there's no regular coverage at all. Like they, will hire some translators occasionally to translate English articles, which is not the same, but at any rate.
And there are, like, I've known Laura Armstrong for a while. Laura, if you're listening, we will miss you greatly on this side of the ledger. Best of luck in all your work in your new job. But she did terrific stuff covering women's and men's soccer for the Toronto Star, which is the biggest daily city local broadsheet in Toronto. She did a great job for many years there. And look, there are a lot of good people who work at One Soccer, who work with the CanPL, who create content over there. People who you and I know, Duane, have known for a long time. Oliver Platt, Christian Jack. Now Laura's there. A lot of good people who work on their TV broadcasts. Gareth Wheeler is another one who you and I have known for a long time. But it's a whole, as we've said, their lack of coverage in French to cover Quebec, which is one of the most soccer mad, soccer enthused, pick your choice of word. The sport is wildly popular in Montreal in particular. And if I was involved in marketing, I would want to go get that audience. We've gone that now around that point, around and around enough times, I think. And let's take one quick moment, Duane, before we call time on this. We are, I guess we're 2 months out. There's still a long ways to go before the CONCACAF championships, but we know the field now. We know the tournament is going to be in Mexico, which is going to add a very interesting dynamic to the whole thing, especially the United States playing Mexico. All the games are in Monterrey, in the Monterrey area, at Tigres Stadium, at Monterrey Stadium. They're great venues. They will be sold out. They will be, for the Mexico games in particular, including USA Mexico, they will be deafeningly loud. The United States women have not played in an atmosphere like that in an awfully long time, and it will be fascinating to see how they do. And there are some interesting tweaks to this tournament, as we know. It's qualifying for the 2023 World Cup. It's qualifying for the 24 Olympics. And here's the twist: only the team that wins the whole tournament qualifies directly for the Olympics. That adds some stakes and some spice to this thing that there have never been before. And Duane, what's the conversation like going in Canada at the moment about how you think it might play out?
Well, I mean, the draw, it was a pretty normal draw for Canada. Costa Rica in the group, which should be beatable, but it's that semifinal game. As you mentioned, when you put the home field advantage in there, even making the final is not necessarily, a guarantee. Now, there's a second chance to get to a World Cup, but this is a team that's success has been largely driven by its Olympic success. And, that's undeniable. It's Olympic success, 3 straight medals with defending champions. Say what you want about how they did it. They're still the defending champions, right? And to have such a difficult path to get back to do that again is a real hit, I think, to them. And I think the U.S. is going to be out for a little bit of revenge. They're still the clear favorite. They're still the top dog out there. I mean, that's clear. I mean, maybe they could have used a little refreshing at the Olympics or something, but they're going to be angry about that, and they're going to want to get back to the World Cup.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're necessarily they'll have that circled for another chance to beat Canada in a game where they, to get back to the way that things are supposed to play out in their mind, right? So it's a tough draw, and it's a tough format, but that's good in a way too, because I think it's good that Mexico will be a challenge. I think that they were the most disappointing team in the last few years for me. I expected them to step up more. But, to take my partisan hat off for a second and just look at this from the growth of the game perspective, it's kind of disappointing that Canada and the U.S. were still as far ahead as they were in the last qualifying cycle. So, this will add a twist to it. And I think it's great for the region that it's not going to be, in Florida or something again. With all due respect, we understand why so many tournaments are in the U.S., but I don't think that's good for anyone, including the U.S., to always play at home. So it's a good challenge that way, and it'd be good for the growth of the region. You got to love what the Mexican Federation has done with their league down there, and the success and the popularity of it is wonderful to see. So this is an opportunity for them to prove that that's working. And I've been saying it for years that Canada needs to needs to look over its shoulder a little bit, because once Mexico, if they ever get firing on all cylinders and work out some of the issues that they've had in the past, then no guarantees anymore to get to the World Cup here.
Yeah, and for those who don't know or who have forgotten, the way the format of this tournament will work: 2 groups of 4 teams each. Group A is the USA, Mexico, Jamaica, and Haiti. It is easily the harder of the 2 groups, even for the United States having to play both Mexico and Jamaica. Group B is Canada, Costa Rica, Panama, and Trinidad and Tobago. The top 2 teams in each group will qualify to the World Cup, as well as advancing to the knockout stage of the tournament. The third place teams in each group will go to the Interconfederation playoffs for what will be a World Cup of 32 teams, which is why it's a lot easier now to qualify out of CONCACAF for a World Cup than it's ever been. And then in the knockout rounds, the fun will really start. Semifinals, and then the final and third place playoff. Only the winner of the whole thing, as we said, qualifies directly for the 24 Olympics in France. The loser of the final and the winner of the third place game will play a playoff for another berth to the Olympics, which obviously has not expanded the field whatsoever. I don't know when that playoff is going to be. I am scrambling and looking it up. September of 23 is when it says. The CONCACAF Olympic Play-In Series is what it's called. So I'm guessing that will be home and away, or at least that was the idea when it all got started, when they came up with these things. Duane, anything we've missed, do you think?
No, that about covers it, Jonathan. I think it's good to talk Canadian women's soccer. It's sort of with all the excitement with the men's team up here, I think are guilty of not talking enough about the Olympic champions. So I'm happy to have that opportunity.
All right, Duane, before we wrap up, just one more thing. This is my last show in the host's seat of the Women's Soccer Review. It's my decision, not anybody else's. It's mine, because I've just got so much going on at the Inquirer at the moment, including a little promotion that I got recently. I think I've mentioned to folks here over time that I am also, I've also for many, many years, 15 plus, been one of the editors of our homepage, not just a reporter. And I finally have been promoted to just being a reporter full time now, which is going to allow me to do a lot of great soccer features. It's going to allow me to dive in on the WNBA, which I did recently, as a number of you have seen. I'm very excited about that. Just going to be some changes to my time and commitments. Duane, I'm always happy to be at your service for Soccer Today or as a guest on anything else, as you guys would like. This is the 44th episode of the Women's Soccer Review that I have hosted, going back to the very first one, which was in 2019, if my memory's right. December of 2019 was the first one. Duane and I were together on the first one, and so we'll be together on the last one that I am in the host's chair for. And Duane, I wish you and Kevin, both of you guys, of course, are my dear friend. It's been far too long since I've been in Toronto or Montreal, and I hope to fix that one of these days. It's been a great pleasure doing this. I've had a lot of fun with it, and I thank you guys for the opportunity.
You're welcome, Jonathan. You're probably the voice that's been on our shows more than any other, except for our own, of course. So we do always thank you for your time, and your insight into the women's game is second to none. There's a quick admin here. I'll put it out there for anyone listening. If you're interested in this, we can help you along with the technical side of things. Just zip me off an email, dgrollins@gmail.com. It's dgrollins@gmail.com. Zip me off an email. I particularly am interested in a female voice to take the lead on this project, because I think that, like too many podcasting networks out there, there's too many middle-aged white guys with their opinion, and I'm happy to help. I'm happy to add my insight. I've covered the women's game a long time, but I would love to have a women's voice on this show. So give me an email if you're listening to this, and Canadian, American, doesn't matter where you are. We do everything remotely, and we can maybe talk from there.
Well, and I look forward, hopefully, to that happening. That's something that I'm obviously in full support of, and I've been very happy for that I've been able to bring so many of my friends and colleagues onto this show over the 2.5 or so years that it's been. introducing some folks that maybe some people knew about or read before, or maybe they hadn't, to bring them on and have some great conversations about the women's game all the way around the world. And so we will call time right there. Duane and Kevin, thank you guys. And to all the listeners, thank you all so very much for listening to the Women's Soccer Review here on the Sports Podcasting Network. I'm Jonathan Tannenwald on behalf of Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie. We'll see you all down the road.